Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the Flanders China Chamber of Commerce and the province of East Flanders, we warmly welcome you to our webinar on innovation in China's agricultural sector, current situation and opportunities. The province of East Flanders is a long-standing structural partner of our chamber, and since 30 years they have an economic and scientific cooperation with their twin province in China, the province of Hebei, a province which also has a lot of opportunities in the agricultural sector. I also like to mention the long-standing structural partnership between our chamber and FIT. Today, experts will speak about innovation in China's agricultural sector and the opportunities for our companies. We will start with Mr. Johnny Broas, chairman of Cedar Clean Energy, who is an old China hand and has been living and working in China for almost 20 years. Johnny also works with European Chamber in China and provides executive coaching with hands-on support to business leaders doing business with China. He will provide an insight into the developments currently taking place in the Chinese agricultural sector. He will offer his analysis on how agritech, big data, digitalization, ecommerce, and fintech are revolutionizing the Chinese agricultural ecosystem. Our second speaker will be Mr. Chris Vivet, who is Sales Manager Asia, Middle East and Oceania of BioBest, Belgium, who will share the experiences of BioBest in China. China is really a market which cannot be ignored. One of the latest developments which will offer new opportunities is the agreement in principle on the comprehensive agreement on investment reached between the EU and China. The agreement grants European investors a greater level of access to China's market and will level the playing field for European businesses in China. Let me end by saying a few words about the Flanders China Chamber of Commerce. Our chamber was founded 15 years ago by the largest investors from Belgium in China. We assist Flemish companies doing business in China and help Chinese companies to find partners in Belgium. Our chamber, we also give weekly China business newsletter to keep you up to date on China's economy and foreign trade. We organize webinars on how to and also how not to do business with China and give expert advice. In normal situations, we receive Chinese delegations, but when COVID-19 will be solved, we don't know when, we will receive them in again. In the meanwhile, we work online. Before ending a practical point, you can ask questions via the Q&A button. They will be answered after the presentations. And I would now like to give the floor to Mr. Johnny Brewas, Chairman of Cedar Clean Energy.
Very happy to be here. Good morning, everyone, and thank you again, Gwen, for the opportunity to speak. I'll give your members a quick deep dive into what is happening in China's agriculture industry. First, I'm going to answer the question that I always get: how did I end up in China? Well, 18 years ago, after a career of 10 years in Belgium, I had a motorbike accident and I had 8 months time to watch the ceiling of my room and to read some books. So I got fascinated by how different China seemed to be. So actually I sold my house and I took off on an adventure starting a new life in China. Today, I'm happily married to a Chinese woman. I practice standing meditation, as you can see, also Chinese philosophy. I love experimenting with Chinese Qigong and ice bathing and pioneering new businesses. That's what I've been doing the last 18 years. Professionally, these days, I run a company in renewable energy and carbon. I provide executive coaching and strategic consultancy around China business and working with Chinese people. I'm also setting up an investment fund for tech companies moving into China. And as you said, I'm the national vice chair supporting European companies' interest in China. So in today's presentation, I will provide some high-level insights from my work of the last year, mainly in the crop growing industry. So I'm not going to talk about animal industry, but I'm going to talk about crop growing industry. I will start with a blitz overview of some numbers. So the agriculture industry represents $1 trillion USD, with crop, mainly grains, taking up the biggest part. grains are mainly corn, rice, and wheat, and they have specific areas in China where they are predominant, as you can see. 20% of the vegetables are grown in controlled environments like greenhouses. This is where we see industrialization starting. Orchards are mainly growing fruit such as typical oranges and apples, but you can also see the other main fruits and the respective provinces where they are predominant. Now, of the agriculture industry, 27% of the China labor in there has a relatively low education level. So the agriculture industry in China is actually representing more than a quarter of the population's labor force, but they're all low educated mainly. So next, I'm gonna move to which are the challenges that China agriculture industry is facing. Now, first of all, there actually is a shortage of grain, and it's actually getting tougher because the population is starting to eat more meat. Now, if all Chinese people would eat as much meat as we do, we would be in a big problem. Because China has a relatively low amount of arable land. It's one of the countries with the least amount of arable land compared to its population. And it actually even has decreased in the past years due to development, contamination, and also conversion to ecological use, like ecological parks. Now, the younger generation actually is less interested in the old farming practices because it's a very tough life to work in the farming industry. It is still a lot of small farm holders, which has a lot of tough labor conditions. Also, the habits of the old farmers, for example, on the amount of pesticides they use and how they apply it, they're hard to change. So there's still a lot of overuse of fertilizer, for example, and overuse of pesticides, and this is degrading the land quality. Not only that, China has relatively a low amount of water, and water scarcity is making good irrigation practices increasingly important. This is one of the key challenges China is facing as well. Now, to address all these, the government has made a move to change the smallholder farms to larger scale farms, as you can see here. But also, you see the numbers, the biggest amount of the agriculture industry is still in the hands of the smallholders. Now, let's have a look at how China is modernizing the agriculture industry. China is a central planeconomie, as you know. It's a different system that we have in Belgium and in Europe. A planeconomie basically means that every 5 years, they make an update on the progress of the last 5 years. And every 5 years, they set new priorities, depending on the country's needs. It's a very systematic, very consequent move forward into a specific direction. Now, the most recent shift, the most recent policy that is critical to understand where things are going is actually the digitization of the agriculture and rural area. It's a plan set for 2019 to 2025. Now, this initiative aims at building on technology, machinery, not only that, also digitization, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and so on. Now, the government started incentivizing getting larger and modern farms as a result of this. Also started incentivizing the e-commerce and innovation in general. Now, they also developed specific objectives for different parts of the country, not only to get certain outputs of certain crops, because this is how a planned economy works. The amount of crops in different parts of the country is actually planned, but also to incentivize specific research and innovation. And this is happening via modern agricultural parks, the maps. Now, these maps actually are key to understand how China's planned economy works, and also to understand how you, if you want to enter the China market, need or should or best enter this market via this ecosystem. Because you will see there's the local government, which is executing what the central planeconomy is asking them to do. And they get all kinds of instruments for that to incentivize with tax and so on. The second pillar are the universities, where the research and development has happened. Also R&D centra, because again, these are doing research specifically for what the planeconomy is asking them to do. And then finally, the industry, obviously, because again, also the industry, companies in China know what the planeconomy is asking to do in the specific parts of the country is going to be what is going to be incentivized. And these incentives might not be always there in year one. They might go and come in year 2, in year 3, because whatever is needed to reach that goal after 5 years is going to happen. So it is a dynamic something where if you understand how the ecosystem works, you know you need to be part of it or figure out how to be an important part of it, because it's always going to be incentivized. Now, here you can also see the key stakeholders in China's agriculture ecosystem. You can see the three in the middle: the business, the government, and the farmers, the equipment providers, and so on. But here I want to make a specific point. So all these players, they are individual companies, but what the government now is systematically doing is to connect all these players by digitizing the whole value chain. So you can imagine state-owned enterprises, for example, fertilizer companies, or for example, very big farm companies, but also e-commerce, also R&D, all of these stakeholders are now going digital. They're all connected, state-owned enterprises, private companies, but also R&D centra, universities, and the service industry and the entrepreneurs are being incentivized to facilitate the growth, the progress in this ecosystem, in this value chain. Now, as you have seen, China has access to data in a very detailed way. You can see this with how COVID is being managed. In the same way, they have data on an enormous amount of things you can't even imagine. But this data is now being centralized and is being made available for players into this industrial value chain. So this is big data. In addition to that, artificial intelligence is being invested. So the players in this value chain, they get access to big data with AI to then figure out how to optimize processes, solutions, cooperation models, and so on. So you can imagine how this is accelerating over the next couple of years. And it's also important to realize this is not only for the agriculture industry. This digitization of the industrial value chain actually is happening in all the industries. This is part of China's 2025 manufacturing plan. So here you can see how it works when the central planeconomy starts rolling out. In the meanwhile, there are already these maps in 31 provinces. Now, if you want to enter the market, you need to understand the KPIs of these maps, because what is what they need to do. So, of course, these maps, they need to still target GDP. But as you have seen in the recent 2 sessions, GDP is set relatively low because they don't want to put pressure. But at the same time, there's still a target. Now, a second KPI of the maps is basically talents and the ability to generate patents, and also the ability for them to create more companies. Now, it's good to know that these maps not necessarily want your IP. They are more interested in the leverage they can get from you to grow the foundation of this ecosystem. This is why solutions that can facilitate or catalyze the interactions between the other stakeholders to accelerate the growth of the ecosystem are actually the most attractive to them. So the key in this is how your solutions serve the localized KPI of the central planeconomie, as you can see here. Now, due to the potentially disruptive nature of digital farming solutions, those digital farming solutions are actually the most interesting for China at this moment. This is also where you see most support and most empowerment. And this slide also shows you why. Because digital farming solutions can increase operational efficiency, they can reduce labor requirements, improve environmental performance, reduce the cost, ensure the food security, and also make the industry attractive to young people and entrepreneurs. And you can see all these items that I just mentioned are totally in line with what the government tries to achieve. Now, also the financial industry is very active in the agriculture industry today with financing and insurances and e-commerce. Especially e-commerce has made huge investments, and this was triggered by COVID in February last year, but in the meanwhile is skyrocketing. So with some platforms such as, for example, Pinduoduo, already pledging to sell 145 billion worth of farm produce annually by 2025. Now, as you know, China has already rolled out the network that enables digital solutions to be used. Even in the countryside, it's enormous how much of that is available, so that even a farmer in the middle of nowhere, living in a way of, let's just say, 50 years ago, what we would see in Belgium, still has access to the most modern technology for selling the produce. You see very funny movies like local farmers selling their products. At the same time, you see now how they start using, for example, satellite via their phone to figure out when should I use which kind of fertilizer for my crop after I've taken a picture of my crop, because this picture has AI to analyze what my crop needs. And then the system actually helps them to understand what might be the price they can sell the crop on. So all these things, they are accelerating at an incredible speed. Now, I just want to summarize what I talked about today. That is that it's a large opportunity. It's really a central plan economy, which means that it's a very clear indication of where it's going, what is important. There is also a very specific model that actually is implementing this plan. There is also a very clear ecosystem with the maps that is executing this. As we mentioned before, there are 6 focus areas that are going to be very attractive to play in, especially if you have a disruptive impact. Digital farming in general is a key focus because of having that disruptive nature. And last but not least, I'm going to quickly touch on fintech. So you may have noticed that China has already been issuing a digital currency. They have adapted the green bond standards to kind of open it up for the international market. They're now actually having green financing incentives. Now, with the economy already ramping up, with COVID under control, with the opening of the market, you can see that the large investment companies like a Goldman Sachs, they see the opportunity. They already went in. And you also see they are very eagerly trying to figure out how to become part of this market, not only with investment in general, but also with fintech. Now, the most recent, very fascinating development I've seen in the agriculture industry is that there are now entrepreneurs in certain parts of the country beginning to use, how shall I say it, non-tradable funding, the NTF, tokenizing, blockchain solutions to conceptually combine a number of stakeholders in this ecosystem by means of smart contracting, where each of the player in a region gets a certain value in this ecosystem. For example, a farmer has a certain value because having a farm and land and being able to produce. An e-commerce company has a certain value because of being able to sell the produce. A harvester company has a certain amount of value. A startup company with a new solution has an amount of value. And in the blockchain context, all these players are put together in a basket. It's like eggs in a basket, and investors now are able to actually invest in the basket using fintech. So they don't need to invest in a specific startup or in a specific, for example, state-owned enterprise, if it even were possible, or a specific private company or whatever. They can actually invest in the solution as a whole, which reduces the risk and which makes it incredibly interesting to see how that's going to develop. Because once this rolls out, and whichever solution is successful actually always rolls out very quickly through the maps. If this rolls out, you're going to see a new market being created, which is low risk, but in agriculture, which is at this moment one of the attractive markets. So I would like to end with this final contemplation and go back to Gwen for the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Johnny, for your very interesting presentation on China's innovation in the agricultural sector. It's really very impressive. Before we go over to the questions, I would like to take them at the end. And I would like to invite Mr. Chris Vivet, General Manager, Sales Manager of BioBest, to share the experiences of BioBest in China. Mr. Vivet, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. Do you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. So thank you very much. Also, thank you, Johnny, for sharing your experiences. I can say that a lot of the information that you have given sounds very familiar. So my name is Chris Vivet. I'm the sales manager for BioBest Group for Middle East and Asia. And we are active in the industry of biological pollination and biological crop protection. The territory for which I'm responsible covers basically starts in Turkey and goes up to Japan. Inside of that territory, we have 3 subsidiary companies. One is based in Turkey, one is based in Israel, and the most recent one is based in China. We are now active in China for, let's say, roughly speaking, about 6 years. Now, before diving into China, a few more words about BioBest itself. So within our company, we have about 22 different subsidiary companies worldwide. 10 of these companies are production units, and the other ones are mainly trading companies. All in all, we employ about 1,600 people, and we are mainly an exporting company, and we export to about 70 countries. The headquarters of the company is in Belgium, obviously, and it's located in Westerlo, about 30 kilometers east of Antwerp. Now, with BioBest Group, we have basically 2 main activities. One activity is what we call bumblebee pollination. which is also what you see now on the slide. So on the right-hand side, you see this insect called the bumblebee, Bombus terrestris. This is the earth bumblebee. And this is being used to pollinate a lot of different crops. So here on the picture, you can see it pollinating a blueberry crop. Now, bumblebees, they occur in nature, but in nature, of course, they follow the natural cycle. We have managed to produce them year-round. So we have a production system in closed conditions, quarantine conditions. And basically, it enables us to offer bumblebees at any given time of the year. So to give you an idea, we produce about 10 to 15,000 bumblebee colonies on a weekly basis. And we pack these into a kind of boxes, the boxes which you see on the left-hand side here. This is what we call a bumblebee hive. So inside of such a box, you will find about 100 bumblebees, which continues to grow when it is active in the crop. So we pack our bumblebees into these kind of boxes, and we export these to many different countries. This can be road transport, but this can also be air transport. A grower receives these boxes, places these boxes into his greenhouse. We are mainly active in indoor crops. This greenhouse can contain all different kinds of crops, for example, tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, strawberries, and many more. And basically what the grower does, he places these hives into his crop, opens the hive, bumblebees, they fly out and they pollinate the crop. They create fruit set in the crop, and basically they enable the grower to increase his yield and the quality of his fruit. So this is a first activity of our company. A second activity is biological crop pollination, crop protection, I mean. So besides the specific insect of bumblebee, we also produce about 40 more insects, and these are used for pest control, and again, in greenhouses. So in greenhouses, a lot of different pests occur, for example, aphids. And one of the most famous predators of aphids is the ladybird, which you also see on the slide in the middle with the red shield. And so this is one example of the insects which we produce, but besides this, we produce many more. We produce these again in closed environments. We pack these into kind of bottles, buckets, breeding sachets, and we send them again to many different countries to be used by the growers. Growers release them in the greenhouse, and these insects, they actively look for their prey, which is the pest insect. They keep the pest insect under control, and by doing this, actually, the grower can reduce a lot on the amount of chemicals that they use. So these are our main activities. Now, coming to China. Why are we as BioBest interested in China? And a lot also corresponds with the previous presentation. So we see that the Chinese government is putting really a lot of attention to human health, the reduction of chemicals in general, and food safety. Now, in conventional crops in China, they use an incredible amount of chemicals, but nowadays growers are really forced to consider other alternatives. And one of the alternatives is then bumblebees. And so we can come in and we can offer them a biological solution which can avoid already some chemical usage. Second reason is lack of labor in agricultural areas. So you see a very big trend going on in China, whereas let's say the more conventional way of growing into the small sized greenhouses is not coming to an end, but is reducing. So this is kind of a family-owned business. It passes from one generation to the next generation, and the newer generations, the younger generations, they are not so much interested anymore to continue this activity. They move to the bigger cities and they abandon the agricultural areas. This means that there is a shortage of labor into those areas, and a part of the work, for example, that needs to be done in greenhouses is to pollinate a crop by using chemicals or by doing manual labor. And then again, we can come in to offer them an alternative by using the bumblebees. Now, with this movement to the big cities, the population in these bigger cities, they continue to grow. So the food demand in these big cities is also continuing to grow. And let's say the income of the people who live in these big cities is also growing. So they pay more attention to what they eat. They have a higher income. They can spend more money on food. So they also spend more time on considering what is being used on the food that they are eating. So the government is now also starting up projects and programs to invest a lot in building big high-tech greenhouses nearby big cities. So for example, nearby Beijing, Shanghai, but almost nearby every big city, you can see these buildings coming up. And so with high-tech greenhouses, you can see here, for example, the picture of a greenhouse nearby Beijing, where we supply also the bumblebees to do the pollination. Next to that, you have the sheer greenhouse surface. And so as Johnny also indicated, there is a lot of production going on in China. Now for us, not all agriculture is interesting, only the greenhouse production, but this is also 650,000 hectares, roughly speaking, in China, which is of interest to us. Now, to give you an idea, in Europe, Spain is one of the main countries producing vegetables inside of greenhouses, and they produce in about 25 to 30,000 hectares. In China, you can find 650,000 hectares. So this is also a very big motivation for us. And then last but not least is we consider China as our future base for export. So today we are active in countries like Japan, Korea, looking to Vietnam, and we would like to start exporting from China to these countries. What specifically do we do in China? So we are producing bumblebees in China, so one insect, and we produce these into climate rooms. So you can see here an example of a climate room. We have about 4 or 5 different rooms like this. This is also enabling us to provide bumblebees to the Chinese growers year-round. We have a local team in China of about 15 people. We have a production department, we have a sales department, and a small finance department. And everything is being steered by the local general manager, the local business unit manager, whose name is Wan Jun. Our region of activities, you can see on this picture. So we are located where you see that red button in the Shandong province, which is the province where the majority of the cropping is happening inside of greenhouses. And so there you have a huge surface, which is our, let's say, a main market nearby. Next to that, you have the regions around Beijing, Shanghai, where a lot of high-tech greenhouses are being built. So that's also a focus area for us for sales. Then you have the area between Shenyang and Dalian, where you find a lot of orchard crops, open field crops, in which we can also use bumblebees. And then in the southwest, in Yunnan province, near Kunming, you have a lot of big international and also local Chinese companies who are producing huge quantities of blueberries. And again, this is quite interesting for us. So these are our focus areas. Our customers, you can see, are quite between two extremes. On the left-hand side, you can see the very conventional way of growing inside of traditional solar Chinese greenhouses. So one greenhouse is 1 mu, which is about 670 square meters. And such a greenhouse is a customer for us for about 4 of our hives on a yearly base. So not too big, but of course, if you look at the quantity of them together, then this is becoming interesting for us. On the other side, you see the high-tech greenhouses. This is an example of a project nearby Shanghai, which is currently being built. This is 15 hectares, 5 blocks of 3 hectares. And this is good for us for about 600 hives in sales. So obviously this is a key account to us, and this is getting a lot of attention from us. Now, to go over some of our experiences in China. So at a certain moment, it was clear that China was an interesting market to us. So we started to investigate. Normally what we do is that we start up teaming together with a local distributor in a certain country. We work together for a number of years. We build the market together. And when we are at a certain level of the market, then we consider to start up a local production. And so we already have a solid base of sales. In China, unfortunately, this was not possible. Importing living insects, animals into China is a very complicated matter. And the result was that we can only import once every 2 months. But in reality, to do a stable business, we should be able to import once every week, once every 2 weeks. So we abandoned that idea and we decided to go for a semi-production in China. A semi-production means that we start with the bumblebee queen, which is basically the mother of the hive. She starts laying eggs. So it means we are importing the queen in China and we are starting from that queen to produce our colonies. But then again, we came into a difficulty because it has never been done before to import these kind of queens in China coming from Belgium. So we needed to get a bilateral agreement between the veterinary services of Belgium and the veterinary services of China. All in all, this took about 2 years to get established because of a lot of complexities down the road. But at a certain moment, we managed to get this. So Beijing basically approved the import from Belgium. Then we ran into another problem, which was an approval on the national level is not yet necessarily meaning an approval on the local level. So that again took about 2-3 months before also the airport where we wanted to send our insects to, Qingdao Airport, was also accepting to receive these goods, and they appointed a veterinary officer to inspect basically everything that we were doing in China. So this business was going quite reasonably, but at a certain moment in spring 2019, we were confronted with a certain situation, meaning that our imports were suddenly stopped. So we had a valid import permit, but unfortunately we could no longer import. So we were trying to find out the reasons. And at the end, we went into a discussion with the national authorities in China, and basically we understood the message that they wanted us to produce 100% locally, everything there. Now, of course, this is then more sensitive concerning know-how, but at the end, we considered that China was such an important and big market for us in the future that we decided to go for it. And so in the summer of 2019, we started up 100% local production in China, and I'm very happy to say that this is going very well. It's quite successful, and definitely keeping in mind COVID, this was our luck actually that we had 100% local production in China. Concerning that production, also some experiences. So in the beginning, when we were starting in China, we started up with this kind of a distance management system. It meant at that time within BioWest, we were going through a lot of different changes. We were building actually a lot of factories in different countries, and it was not possible to dedicate certain people 100% to China. So the production manager, which was involved in China, could only spend like 10% of his time to support the staff in China. That was certainly a complexity. Another complexity was in China, we are teaming up with a local partner. So we have a joint venture where we have the majority share, and we were employing staff from our joint venture partner. So that stuff in the beginning, there was also some complexities because they didn't really understand how it was working before. They were working for the joint venture partner, but now they were working for us, basically foreigners. So that was also not so easy in the beginning, but took a couple of years, but now actually this is going quite well. Communication issues. This definitely language, obviously, is not an easy thing to sort out. It's easy to have misunderstandings. Meetings take a lot of time, also protocols, to explain protocols, how exactly which need to be followed, and one small mistake can already make a big difference. In that process, we also experienced that bringing bad news was something very sensitive for our Chinese staff. So that also took us a lot of time to convince our staff that they should not hesitate. Things can go wrong. The beginning is always difficult. So if something is going wrong, please inform us as soon as possible. So this also took some time, but nowadays this is running pretty good. Our location was also not ideal, so we are located more on the countryside, let's say. So we suffer a lot from power cuts. So we have a backup generator installed now, so that is working fine as well. And also the logistics, we had some issues there as well. We basically made too much assumptions. In the beginning of our story, we also sourced a lot of components from Belgium because we wanted to offer the same quality in China as we offer in the other countries. And step by step, we also started sourcing more and more in China itself. So the main changes that we have made inside of the production department, let's say, is the production support system. So we changed to a system in which we appointed the person from Turkey actually to give 30 to 40% of his time as support to China. We appointed a local general manager to manage the team, and we started with a local sourcing in China. So we source now about 95% of our components in China itself. Coming to sales. So in the beginning, we relied on the joint venture partner to do the sales. So we were the production experts, and they were normally going to provide our sales distribution network. But of course, we are speaking about a new kind of product for the Chinese market, a new kind of technology. So this was also giving some complications. So there it also took us about a year and a half to really get things going in the market. We also made too many assumptions, and we also were surprised by the chemical usage of the growers. Here in let's say Europe, Western Europe, a high-tech greenhouse grower will be using, let's say, maybe 10 times per year a certain chemical. But in China, the conventional growers, they are actually applying chemicals like 2-3 times per week. So this was also giving problems because obviously these chemicals can also kill our bumblebees. Language also provided some issues and misunderstandings on pricing, contracts, and also some technical aspects of the product. But the last one is actually a very important one. It's kind of unique to us, to China. Subsidy on product and production. So in China, they have subsidy systems to support growers to invest in this type of product, so which is of course positive. But they also have subsidy systems to, let's say, provide companies to start up certain factories in this type of green industry. So it means that certain companies, they apply for a subsidy and they use that subsidy to build and to start bumblebee factories. So this is meaning that we are now facing a lot of competition actually in the local market. And so at the bottom, you can see 4 examples of 4 local bumblebee brands offered by local companies, which are basically popping up in the last 6 to 8 months. So things are moving pretty fast in China. Some changes that we have done on the sales side. So we have stopped the exclusivity of our joint venture partner, and we've taken back control of the sales distribution network. We are focusing much more on certain crops, regions, and type of clients. We have taken back control of logistical systems. That was a complexity in China. They do not offer the system that we need. So we invested ourselves into a certain van, a certain type of van to bring around our bumblebees to airports and to also to customers. And as said before, we also appointed the local general manager to align the different departments. So our successes are that basically our production yields are now up to the group standards. So this is going quite well. We have a very stable and close team, which did amazing efforts, especially during the COVID crisis. And we had members of our staff who spent weeks on the company without going home just to take care about the bumblebees, because they knew if they went home, they probably could not get back anymore. Since about 2 years, we're also realizing the sales targets that we want to, and we are also achieving a nice margin there as well. So there in below, you see some numbers of volumes that we sell, quantities of boxes of hives. And even in the Corona year, which is indicated in red, we managed to do a quite nice increase. And something which is very specific to us in China is online sales. So e-commerce is indeed coming up very strong. We also make advantage of that, and about 15% of our sales in China is going through online channels, which is the only country in the world where we are doing this. Currently, we are the only foreign company which is still present. So all the other foreign companies, which were 4 in the beginning, they have stopped their business. And we are now step by step becoming more of a reference brand in China as well. And now happy to say that also step by step, we are preparing for the next step, which is the biological crop protection. And so we are considering to start a new factory on a new location in China, and also to make the first steps on the export market. To end with, maybe some experiences I shared. What I would do different now maybe is concerning the joint venture partner. I'm convinced we have the right joint venture partner, but it would have been better if we have done more homework in the beginning to be more critical about our sales distribution network, for example. We also should have done more investigation about the location. And one of the things, for example, which we did not pay enough attention to was human resources. We are located in a quite remote area. It's not easy to find the right people in that place. Also invest for the future. You run into a lot of problems. You need to be prepared for it, and doing capital increases is not a very easy thing to do in China. This also tends to take several months of your time. Invest in people, definitely. You need capable people from the very start. And maybe a last one to indicate there is make time. So we did it as in the beginning, we did it actually as a project, one of the many projects which were going on, but this clearly was not the best of starts. We are now 5-6 years down the line, and now we have really dedicated people working on China, and our business is now going much better than in the beginning. Maybe last but not least, also realize what you can and what you cannot do yourself. So in our case, we are very good in producing these bumblebees, into giving advice, into showing growers how to use them. But of course, hiring people in China, organizing logistics in China, building a distribution network in China, that is something that we need partners for. Okay, so these were some experiences from us in China. So if there's any questions, please ask, I would say.
Thank you very much, Chris, for your very interesting presentation, and also congratulations with your success in China. It's very impressive to see that you're also the only foreign company in the business there. So once again, congratulations. I would now like to go over to the questions. So the questions can be asked in the Q&A button. Johnny, you have been in the business already for almost 20 years. What would be your main tips for successfully entering the Chinese agricultural market?
First of all, I would like to congratulate Chris, because a number of those things that I would want to say, he listed in his last slide. So I can see you've gone through the experience yourself. Let me explain this by building onto what Chris had, so it becomes very practical. Because people get nervous when they suddenly see local competitors, right? You're localized and you see local competitors. This is very normal. Now, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It basically means your market is maturing. If something is good in China, it will roll out. So you're going to have to be aware that when you go to China, you're going to see local competitors. But it also means the market is more ready for what you have. And you will always be different as a foreign company. Now, you can also upgrade to get subsidies. Just like they can now benefit with subsidies to compete, you can get subsidies to upgrade in the same way they will upgrade by, for example, going into e-commerce and so on. The other thing which I really want to say is it's really critical now to localize your sales to clients, because you will see that those local competitors, they're gonna have different products like within 1 year. And these products are going to be more fit to the Chinese market. So you need to make sure you have these as well. So you upgrade in the same way. Otherwise, you're going to be noticing that the competitors are going to move ahead. The recommendation, and this is really the main answer for you, Gwen, is that finding that JV partner or finding the partner, I really would recommend not to look for one partner. Look not for an exclusive partner, but don't look for one specific partner, but look for an industrial value chain partner, which means different partners in different parts of the value chain and different partners with different players in the ecosystem. For example, partner with some people in government in some way. Don't have them as a client, but partner with them in helping them to meet certain objectives. Partner with some of the institutes to do innovation. They are looking for that, and you can actually get subsidies for that. Partner with them as well. Partner with companies that are clients, distributors, but partner with companies that, for example, somehow are an adjacent partner. Why is this important? Because when you are having only one partner, you're always vulnerable to the extent that you're valuable for that one single partner. If you have more partners, you're going to see that each of those partners always is going to have to respect you as being someone localized, and they cannot just play with you because they're going to have to be careful that they don't offend another local player, for example. So cross over the whole value chain. Don't take anything for granted. Just like you say, you have to double check everything. But another thing which I want to say is that you will see China, everything you do there is exponential. It takes time. You have confusion, difficulties, because this is communication, the language is different. But once you go past the lag phase, you're going to see it's going to go like this. It's going to go much faster. So be ready for that. Then build trust and long-term relationship, but not only with your team, but with the ecosystem, just like I said, because your ecosystem is going to teach you things, it's going to protect you. And finally, always move, dynamically keep changing to be complementary to the Chinese ecosystem and to facilitate the Chinese ecosystem. In this way, you're always going to have the best protection and you're going to get the best leverage also for yourself to grow. Now, the most beautiful thing is when you do this, when you get to crack that formula, how you can work with that ecosystem, the moment you have something good, you don't need to market your stuff because you're going to simply have 31 provinces with all these maps that are going to be interested in what you have, and you're going to have the endorsement from some of those trusted partners from the government to roll out. They're going to promote you. So wherever your solution then is going to be suitable, which province, which crop, they're going to ask you, can you come and do this here too? And then engage with the local entrepreneurs to see what they can do to leverage you and build that onto your value chain. So this is the feedback I would like to give practically on your case, but also in general.
Thank you very much, Johnny. I have the question coming back to the subsidies. So how, it's for Chris, how come your company could now receive the subsidies?
Actually, at the moment, we are not receiving any subsidies in China. So subsidies, they are very specific. Yeah? So first of all, specific to certain areas in China. And so the region where the majority of the subsidies in our kind of business is now being given is in Beijing area. And we are located in Shandong province. So we are teaming up with distributors in Beijing who can apply for the subsidies there locally. And so this on the sales side, this is definitely helping us. But on the production side, our company cannot, let's say, at the moment participate in these subsidies. But that is also one of the reasons why in the future we are considering to start up a new factory for insect rearing, then for the biological crop protection, which will then be probably in the region of Beijing, Tianjin.
Okay, there was also a question on the slides. Yes, participants will receive the slides here. Okay, maybe Johnny, one more question also, Johnny or Chris. What is actually the number one challenge today when doing a successful business in China? What is the main challenge?
Or you want me to go first?
I can go first as well.
Is that the Chinese competition? Is the Chinese competition, for example, the main challenge?
Oh, it's very. I find it very difficult to name one, and one specific one, because it's basically yeah.
You can name more.
It depends on which stage you are in. So in the beginning, of course, you start working on these bilateral agreements to do import, and you are confronted a lot with the government and the way how the government works. At a certain moment, you start a production, and then you're dealing there again with location, with your JV partner, with your suppliers, and at a certain moment your sales starts. So then again, you're confronted with new challenges. So it's very difficult, I find, to pinpoint one specific main challenge.
But yes, I would say your main challenge today, because as you said in your presentation, and we all know, China is changing very fast. So what would be your main challenges today?
Our main challenge today would be focus. There's, as Johnny also said, there's so many opportunities in China. You have all these different provinces, all these different local regulations and possibilities, and you really need to choose where are you going to focus. You cannot start everywhere at the same time. You don't have the manpower to do this. You cannot do the necessary investments to do this. So that is a big challenge, to really focus and choose the right opportunity.
Okay. Johnny, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, well, Chris is very right. And the key thing to address this is you need to be present. You can't do this from a distance, because things are moving so fast, and you need to basically capture these things before they escalate, and they can escalate very, very quickly. So it's like sitting there in contact with the people and then move very fast. The other aspect of moving fast is also because the market develops so fast, you need to figure out a way that you can actually get leverage from that planeconomie. Because once something is valuable in China, a lot of people are going to jump onto it. And if you don't switch to China's speed at that time, you're going to be no longer relevant, like within 1 or 2 years. So actually you can get leverage from it, but you need to be sitting on top of it. And it does require working with Chinese people, because they move very quickly. They work with trusted relationships. As a foreigner, you will need a lot of time to make an agreement, to get a contract. But actually, Chinese people don't need that, because once they understand where is the leverage, they work ahead without contracts. So this is why this ecosystem is so critical to understand. This is like an ignitable ecosystem. From the moment you got something that lives there, it will explode.
Okay, thank you. I got another question here. How did BioBest cope with the COVID-19 crisis operational over the last year?
Yeah, that was a serious challenge. Yeah. So luckily for us, actually, we had that situation that we needed to start up 100% local production. So we were self-sufficient, which was already a good thing. We were self-sufficient. We had enough stock to continue our production, but it was a very tough time. So our employees, most of them actually, they could not come to the factory. So there was a very limited staff present, and they really lived in the company for weeks in a row to feed the bumblebees. And a next consequence of the COVID was that we could not sell anymore outside of the province. So the borders were basically closed between provinces. So we could only sell within the province itself. But again, luckily, we were in Shandong province, which is the main, let's say, vegetable producing area in greenhouses. So instead of focusing then in areas on Beijing, Shanghai, etc., we really said to our staff to look actively for more opportunities in the province itself. And this turned out, let's say, relatively okay.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. Sorry,
I'd like
Johnny?
to add something to this.
Yes.
So, what you see in China is staff that is having a different attitude than what you see in Europe. So if you have the right kind of leadership there, you'll be amazed to see what you can get done with your staff. On the other hand, it is critical you have that, because we just mentioned competition, and I want to be very clear as well. I'm painting rosy conditions with regard to the market, but I also want to really be very clear. Like, China is like ruthless, you know, it's like extremely competitive, but this is not only to foreign companies, this is also to Chinese companies. But you need to be able to get some leverage on being enough local to be part of the team, to be part of the group. And then you need to have enough friends to be able to compete, because otherwise you will not have a relationship. You would have a contractual relationship that you think you can rely on, but it's not respected in the same way. But it's not necessarily trespassing of a contract. It's sometimes just a cultural difference of looking at a cooperation. And I want to give you an example. Sometimes foreigners come into China and they have an agreement in stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. And they make agreement like who is going to bring what to the cooperation in stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Now you plan for like year 1, year 2, year 3. But in a China context, they don't know times. There's even no time in the Chinese language. They only have like words that actually explain context. So what you see is that a cooperation is set with a certain intention. And you can see this in the way contracts are made and the way it is announced how you're going to cooperate, with whom. So from the moment the market changes and the mutual benefit that both parties bring to each other are no longer relevant, it doesn't matter the contract is finished or not, but the mutual relationship and the benefits is changed, then that stage is considered finished and you go into the next stage. And the Chinese party will think of the next stage already. The foreign party sometimes underestimates that, and they just feel that they're being bypassed. Whereas the Chinese basically say, well, you should know this, because Chinese parties with each other, they know this. So that's why you suddenly will see shifts and moves very quickly. But once you know this, once you're part of the ecosystem, then you also can understand where things are going. And that's when you can move fast. But this is also, if you don't know this, you have to be very careful, because then there is no relationship. If you don't have these conversations, don't assume you have a relationship. You're just a person walking in the shop and there's no commitment. So you have to be very careful to understand those two things.
Thank you very much, Johnny. Thank you, Johnny, Chris, for your very interesting presentations. I would like to end now because our time is up. We have another long individual question that will be sent to Chris separately. The slides and the recordings will be sent to the participants. So thank you very much, and I look forward to welcome you to our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.